Have you ever seen those fluffy little teddy bears that run around on Endor and crash Imperial speeders? Well, turns out they do a lot more than just destroy stuff. Turns out that even though they were developed because George Lucas needed a primitive version of the Wookiee species, they have a surprising amount of lore and development through Legends material, supplementary reference works, and the 2 Ewok television films. These additional works built out a surprisingly coherent tribal society, complete with a layered political hierarchy and an animistic religious tradition, centered on spirits of the forest, tree, and trickster. Taking a closer look at this social and spiritual architecture reveals a culture built less on primitivism for its own sake and more on a deliberate design choice. A Stone Age society whose political structure and spiritual worldview together allow it to defeat the technological might of the Galactic Empire. Ewok society is organized into dozens of autonomous tribes scattered across Endor's forest floor and its towering redwood trees, each occupying its own treetop village connected by rope bridges and platforms. There is no planetary government uniting tribes. Each village functions as a self-contained community with its own chief, council, and customs. This fragmentation is not a narrative shortcut, but a coherent world-building choice. It mirrors real-world tribal societies in which political authority rarely scales beyond the immediate community. Cultural and even kinship ties bind separate communities together without collapsing them into a single political unit. Intertribal relationships range across the full spectrum from alliance and intermarriage to open rivalry and territorial dispute. And travel between villages, as depicted in the Ewok Adventures television films, is itself treated as a perilous undertaking requiring guides and warriors. The tribe featured in Return of the Jedi, usually referred to as Chief Chirpa's tribe or Bright Tree Village, provides the clearest and most detailed window into Ewok political organization. So let's take a closer look at them. At the top of the pyramid sits the chief, an office that in Bright Tree Village is held by Chirpa. Elder status, wisdom, and a demonstrated record of successful leadership all factor into who holds the role. I couldn't quite figure out how succession worked, although there is reference to a princess in the Ewok Adventures animated series as well as the old 1985 comic run. The chief presides over the village council, arbitrates disputes, renders judgment on outsiders and captives, and holds final authority over matters of war, peace, and alliance. Chirpa's decision to accept Princess Leia and the Rebel Strike Team, and later to commit Ewok warriors to battle against the Empire, exemplifies this executive function. A single figure whose word can commit an entire community to war against a vastly superior military power. The chief's authority is symbolically marked through regalia, a distinctive headdress, staff, and cloak, visually distinguishing the office from the rest of the village and signaling status during ceremonies, councils, and combat. Beneath the chief, in formal rank, but arguably wielding comparable, sometimes greater political influence, is the Shaman, or Medicine Man. Embodied in Return of the Jedi by Logray, or Logray, I don't know, it's quite, I don't speak Ewokese, so it probably doesn't translate perfectly, but this figure serves simultaneously as healer, diviner, ritual specialist, and religious authority, mediating between the tribe's political leadership and its spiritual cosmology. Where the chief governs the visible social world, the shaman governs the invisible one, omens, spirits, and the proper conduct of ceremony. This dual authority structure means major decisions in Ewok society are rarely made by political calculation alone. They are filtered through religious interpretation. The clearest example is the shaman's identification of C-3PO as the Golden One upon the droid's arrival in the village. It is Logray's judgment, not Chirpa's, that reclassifies the Rebel Strike Team from prisoners to sacrificial honorees for a feast, demonstrating that religious authority in Ewok society can override or redirect political authority when spiritual stakes are perceived to be in play. Another example of this is once again in the comics from the 1985 Ewoks run. Chief Chirpa's daughter, I can't remember her name, she's the princess, steps on a thorn or gets nicked by a thorn while walking a path back to their village. Logray takes a look at her, says, we can't really do much except for this mystical adventure. Chirpa says, nah, we ain't doing that. And instead, Logray kind of goes a little bit behind his back and sends some scouts to go on a crazy quest. You can read more about it if you want in the comics. Below the ruling pair of chief and shaman sits the warriors, a distinct social role with its own internal ranking of scouts, hunters, and combat leaders. In Bright Tree Village, this stratum is represented by figures such as Paplu, Chirpa's kinsman, who functions as scout and light cavalry. Commandeering an imperial speeder bike during the Battle of Endor, warriors are trained from childhood in stealth, trapping, tracking, and close combat using primitive but highly effective weapons such as spears, slings, bolas, and rolling logs, my favorite weapon. Their training emphasizes an environmental mastery over brute strength. Traps and ambushes and knowledge of terrain substitute for the power they lack, a design logic that became decisive when these warriors are turned against Imperial stormtroopers and ATST walkers. A council of elders advises the chief on major decisions, drawing on accumulated experience and often direct memory of past conflicts or agreements with neighboring tribes or outsiders. Beneath the warrior and elder strata is the broad general population responsible for the village's material life. Hunters and gatherers who provision food, builders and weavers who construct and maintain the treetop village architecture, and domestic labor are organized around extended family units rather than the tribe. Ewok religion is fundamentally animistic, meaning that the forest itself is understood as alive, with spirits inhabiting trees, animals, weather patterns, etc. Nothing in the Endor landscape is spiritually neutral. A fallen tree, an unusual weather pattern, or the arrival of strange visitors are all potential sites of spiritual significance requiring interpretation by the shaman. Now, while it's fundamentally animistic, it's not purely animistic. It contains a structured dualistic mythology centered on two opposing deities. The Ewoks were a deeply spiritual people who revered the surrounding giant trees and believed themselves to be descendants of the Great Tree, with a legend of the Golden One, describing a deity that allowed the Ewoks to live in light. The Golden One's opposite was the adversary, a deity representing darkness and death. According to Logray, the adversary was not evil so much as a necessary rival, a figure representing darkness and death as part of the natural cycle of death and rebirth, rather than a force of malevolence. Ewok mythology held that the Golden One and the adversary struck a bargain to divide the moon into equal parts, creating the ongoing cycle of day and night. Endor forests are also home to dangerous predators and hostile spirits in Ewok belief. And much of daily practice, protective charms, boundary markers, and small offerings is oriented toward maintaining cosmological order against these threats. Death is marked with specific mourning rites overseen by the shaman, reflecting a belief that improper handling of death can disturb the spiritual balance of the surrounding forest. Ewok society, examined past its surface-level cuteness, reveals a tightly constructed anthropological model, a stratified but small-scale tribal hierarchy headed jointly by a secular chief and a spiritual shaman, supported by a warrior class, an advisory council of elders, and a general population organized around kinship as much as formal office. Far from a narrative afterthought, this dual political, religious hierarchy and belief system does substantial thematic work in Return of the Jedi. It is precisely because the Ewoks understand power as communal, spiritual, and cunning, rather than technological brute force, that they are able to defeat an enemy the rebellion alone could not. Now, if you're interested in learning more, the movies referenced are available on Disney+, as well as an animated Ewok show that I actually did end up referencing it because I went off script a little bit. That's also available on Disney+, and there are also multiple comic issues available online as well.